Welcome to the CHCI Leadership Conference panel session on the Office of the Future. This session is possible due to the gracious contributions from our sponsors: Narrate Foundation, Salesforce, Dell Technologies, Workday, and ServiceNow. Our panel chair for this session is Representative Pete Aguilar, who represents the 31st Congressional District in California and is the Vice Chair of the House Democratic Caucus. After remarks by Representative Aguilar, we will also hear welcome remarks from Lori Castillo Martinez, who is Senior Vice President of Employee Relations and Equality at Salesforce. Our moderator for today's session is Marco Davis, President and CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. We are pleased to welcome Representative Pete Aguilar to begin our program.
Hi, I'm Congressman Pete Aguilar. As a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I'm committed to promoting greater workplace diversity and ensuring Americans from all walks of life have a chance to succeed. As you all know, the COVID-19 crisis impacted all of our communities. The abrupt shift to remote work forced many companies to put programs and initiatives on hold. As a result, many diversity and inclusion programs fell by the wayside, leading to fewer opportunities for many workers of color. As we continue to navigate the remote work environment, my colleagues and I are urging our private sector partners to continue focusing on these initiatives. One key component to create opportunities for the Latino community and for all Americans is to expand access to training and workforce development. Apprenticeship programs and training for skilled trades are at the heart of House Democrats' Build Back Better agenda and will continue to play a major role in helping members of our communities find success. As a member of House leadership and a member of the Hispanic Caucus, I'll continue supporting policies that give every American a chance to succeed. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to CHCI's Leadership Conference. I'm Lori Castillo Martinez, SVP Global Equality and Employee Relations at Salesforce, and it's an honor to be with you today and to be a part of today's timely and important discussion about the Office of the Future and how it can shape a more inclusive workforce. The future of work is taking shape before our eyes, but the shift to the digital-first environment is about so much more than how we'll use our office space or communicate with our colleagues. It's about how we can create a future that is more inclusive and reflective of everyone, including the Latinx community. Now, this shift to remote work has taught us a lot about ourselves and opened the doors to new talent and opportunities that will strengthen our communities around the world. At Salesforce, the past 18 months has been one of intense reflection, learning, and transformation. The pandemic and racial reckoning shined a light on systemic inequalities across our society, and we felt we had an urgent responsibility to act. So last year, we established a Racial Equality and Justice Task Force to accelerate our efforts around racial equality and justice across 4 core pillars: people, purchasing, philanthropy, and policy. And since June 2020, we've donated more than $38 million to advance racial equality and justice and spent $135 million with minority-owned businesses. We've doubled the hiring of Black employees and increased overall representation of underrepresented communities across the company. Now, we're encouraged by this progress, but we know there is so much more work to be done, including a focus on experience. Now, we're putting equality at the center of our vision for the future of work with success from anywhere. Without the constraints of office headquarters, we are accessible to everyone. And this has been a huge opportunity that has allowed us to broaden our search beyond city centers and welcome untapped talent from communities, new communities, and geographies. We're designing our talent processes with diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center. And this means building inclusive hiring and promotion processes, enabling our frontline managers on how to address microaggressions and bias in their day-to-day decision-making. It also means including access to leadership through mentorship and development programs for employees of color. Representation really matters. And as we think about the Office of the Future, we as a community have the power to create a future where the Latinx community is seen, heard, and valued. Thank you so much for having me today. I'll now turn it over to our panelists to share their perspectives on how we can make this vision a reality. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marco Davis. I'm the president and CEO of CHCI, and I'm thrilled to be able to moderate this session. It's incredible to be talking about the office of the future, where we're all remote, logging in via screens. And so it's going to be a really lively discussion as part of our leadership conference here. I also want to thank Congressman Pete Aguilar for his opening remarks and for serving as chair for this session. As I just said, the office of the future is something that we're all still figuring out. We're trying to understand what it is, what it's all about, what work is going to look like for the next 6 weeks, 6 months, and 6 years. And so we've got a really great panel of leaders from the corporate sector who are going to be sharing with us some of the efforts that their entities have done and what they're seeing in the field. I think it's going to be really great. So let's get started with the conversation. And I want to mention that I'm just going to briefly introduce my panelists and where they're from. We have their full bios up on our website. I encourage you to go to the website after our session, look up their bios, learn about them, reach out and engage with them. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear from you. But for now, we want to have this dialogue. So first up, I'm really excited to welcome Nicole Francis Reynolds, who is with ServiceNow. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Mark.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us today.
It's an honor to be here.
Wonderful. And our next panelist is John Jones, who's with the NAREIT Foundation. John.
To be here. I appreciate your leadership of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. I also want to thank Congressman Pete Aguilar for his tremendous leadership in the United States Congress, along with CHCI Chair Congresswoman Nanette Barragan, who's been a real champion for working class individuals in Congress. Thrilled to be here today representing NAREIT.
Awesome. Thank you. Our third panelist is Karen Taylor from Workday. Karen, how are you doing today?
Hello, Marco. I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you? It is my pleasure to be here representing Workday as Workday's Chief Diversity Officer. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Workday, we're a leading provider of enterprise cloud applications, and we deliver financial management, human capital management, planning, and analytics applications designed for the world's largest organizations. We are pleased to be here in this very important conversation with CHCI today. So thank you for having us.
Wonderful. And my fourth panelist, I'm really happy to introduce Amber Cantu from Dell Technologies. How are you, Amber?
Hi, I'm doing well. Yes, thank you so much for having me. I just want to thank CHCI for the invitation to share more about Dell's journey towards the office of the future. I know this is a topic that's top of mind for all of us, so great to share best practices from other leaders on the panel.
Wonderful. And so let's get into it. What I thought we could start with is having each of our panelists just share some opening remarks. I'm sure you all have been wrestling with this topic, like frankly the rest of the world has, and may have some insights and some perspectives. So let's start with you, Nicole, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're thinking and what your thoughts are about what we can talk about during this session today.
I'd love to, Marco. And on behalf of our over 15,000 employees with ServiceNow and our CEO, Bill McDermott, it really is an honor to serve as a corporate partner with CHCI and to be part of this panel with Congressman Aguilar and the chair, Congresswoman Barragan. As we all know, now more than ever, we have to operate and execute the way we do our business, and the way we learn, and just the way that we execute in a different way. And ServiceNow's mission is to make the world of work better for people. And so we are a cloud company that has one single architecture that enables businesses and governments and just enterprises in general operate their processes in a much more efficient way. We know that we will not return to doing things the same way that we did in the past. And so that requires software that is much more nimble, much more efficient, much more secure, and much more safe. And so it's just a pleasure and an honor to be here to talk about what that looks like. What does diversity look like as we embrace what we're calling digital transformation, and et cetera. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that with all of you and these other distinguished panelists today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you for sharing about the work that you all are doing. So John, tell us about how NAREIT is thinking about this challenge and how you all are tackling this topic.
It's a very important question. Look, NAREIT represents over 200 publicly held real estate companies. The REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust portfolio is $3.5 trillion. It's a massive, massive portfolio. As sure you're aware, real estate is the largest sector in the United States. REITs are a diverse portfolio, everything from office building REITs to hotels to health centers to retail to shopping malls and shopping centers. And in addition to that, it's also cell towers, data centers. When we hear the notion that data is stored on the cloud, as you all know, it's not in the sky, it's in buildings with floors full of servers and additional floors full of more and more servers. And we also have industrial REITs. These are warehouses where all the packages that you order online are being processed through these facilities. So we talk about data centers and you talk about warehouse centers and you're talking about cell towers. That's the backbone of the internet, especially during the pandemic economy, where more and more people are buying things online and where more and more people are streaming, working from home. And in the evening, they're on their Netflix and their Prime watching everything you can imagine. So it's something that definitely impacts our members, but probably our office building REITs more in particular. And that begs the question, what does technology mean to this particular world of REITs? And the impact will be proportional to the type of business one is involved in. I will say this, pundits have been predicting that everyone would be working from home since the invention of the fax machine and the introduction of overnight mail. But there is nothing that you can really replace with these accidental collisions that happen in the office, at the water cooler, or taking those walks through the hall. And so, as I've said before, the Office of the Future is not an esoteric debate about one particular subject. It affects every policy that Congress will be analyzing in the future, whether it's labor policy, immigration policy. If no one's in the office, the question will be asked, does the software engineer need to be here in the United States, or can that work be done abroad? And if a company can do work not outside of the home, outside of the office and in the home, can that work also be done outside of the country? And what's the future of diversity initiatives in the workplace if no one's in the workplace? And how do we deal with even issues like sensitivity training or workforce training if there's no workforce in the office? These are all important questions, and it's good that they're being discussed because these policy issues, they really need to be addressed before our economy goes through any future transition. So again, great to be here today and look forward to discussing all of these issues.
Thank you, John. That's really some really great, profound insights that you've shared that frankly, I hadn't thought of, right? There's a lot of implications. It's much more than just, do you have an internet connection, right? It's so much more deep and so much more complex than that. So thank you for sharing that. So Karen, tell us about how you all at Workday are handling this.
Yeah, there's a lot in what John and Nicole have already started in terms of this conversation. And as we think about this, there's no doubt that the last 18 months have opened all of our eyes to the fact that we need positive change in the world. And what we knew is now behind us, and we need to look forward, and things will be different. And I think that that's what we're all dealing with. But it's opened our eyes to some layered complexities of issues impacting most of us really on a regular basis. And in many cases, we're having to address multiple issues all at one time. Not only are these issues hard, they're sensitive, and in many cases, we're still trying to figure out what we're trying to solve for and how we're trying to solve for all of these nuances. But regardless of the issues that are now surfacing, we have an obligation as corporations to address these issues for our employees, for our customers, and for the communities we serve. So as I think about this in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and really amidst the global pandemic, Workday is really doing some stuff to really put their money where their mouth is. And that's where I think, very similar to my other panelists here, we're taking this seriously because we understand the impact that it's going to have both now as well as in the future of how we engage. Workday has something that we call DEIB, which stands for Value, Inclusion, Belonging, and Equity for All. And it's our approach to belonging and diversity. And really, as we think about it, we also want to make sure that we're supporting everything that's happened over the last year, whether or not it was through the social justice movement or as we were helping our caregivers and our employees deal with the impacts of the pandemic. But Workday actually doubled down on a few areas that I'll just mention really quickly in terms of where we need to do more and where we need to do better. Hiring and development of diverse talent, all the way from the lowest level all the way through all levels of leadership. What can we do better? Cultivating a culture of belonging. What does belonging look like? How do we build inclusive products and technologies? And then how do we strengthen the communities that we serve? And so through this intentional focus, we've seen some really great results, like significant increases in our Black and Brown populations, but we still need to do more. That's not enough. We also need to recognize that the economic impacts of COVID and how they have disproportionately impacted our Black and Brown communities. We need to make sure that we are even more so emphasizing what we need to do from a social justice perspective and put not just our money and our resources, but our backing behind people who are really trying to make progress in this space. So, looking to the future, we'll apply lessons that we've learned. We'll continue to do this hard work. We'll continue advocating for the policies that are being pushed, including things like reskilling for talent. And so there's a lot that's out there, as we've talked about already. And so we're making some good progress, but collectively, we definitely have a lot more to do. But looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing that and for the admirable work that it seems you all are doing. That's wonderful. And so over to you, Amber. Tell us about how things are going at Dell Technologies, how you all are handling this topic, this idea, how you all are approaching it.
Yeah, when I think about the office of the future, there's really these three elements that I think organizations need to be successful. They need to be adaptable, they need to drive progress, and they need to be inclusive. So as I think about how Dell has really tackled these things, is first the adaptability. Much like other companies as well, practically overnight, we had to equip an entire global workforce with the tools and technology to work from anywhere. But we not only had to do this for our own workforce, but for the workforce of our customers. So you think about putting technology in the hands of millions of employees during the most challenging time ever. That's really true adaptability. The second one on driving progress, I really love that our CEO, Michael Dell, says what is measured gets done. It's the reason that we have these established social impact 2030 goals called Progress Made Real. And they're ambitious, they're meaningful, and they span across sustainability, inclusion, technology, and even ethics. And they really shape how we work and how we lead and how we interact with our customers. And then if you think about that third bucket of inclusion under Progress Made Real, we have an established set of 2030 moonshot goals that really serve as our North Star for achieving diversity in our teams. And this is allowing us to not only build a bigger table, but cast a wider net. And it includes representation for women in the global workforce, as well as Black and African American and Hispanic and Latinx in our US workforce, both for our team members as well as our people leaders. And so when you put these three elements together really well, and you have an organization like Dell that supports them, it's really how you change the culture and create the office of the future. So looking forward to hearing more from the panelists on how they bring this culture change to life.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amber, and thank you all of you for those wonderful comments already. We're off to the races from the very beginning. So let me circle back around to you, Nicole. one of the things is, that CHCI is dedicated to primarily is to developing the next generation of Latino leaders, right? So I'm wondering how you all at ServiceNow are focusing on preparing the next generation of leaders for the future of work. We know that everything is shifting. Things were shifting even before the pandemic, right? And you all are steeped in this, assisting others in figuring out sort of how to navigate the future of work. So what are some of the efforts that you all are doing?
Absolutely. So we are engaged in a number of programming and partnerships. We work with, in the state of California alone, over 11 HSIs, where we have the opportunity to integrate our products at the institutions in California. We have a phenomenal program called NextGen, where we are working with some phenomenal organizations, institutions in the states and even abroad to educate young people and veterans and others about what these jobs of the future look like. And really, it's what the jobs now require and what they look like. And what I love about this Next Gen program is that that those who take the program finish with a certificate and a job, not just a certificate. And they work with either ServiceNow or one of our customers. And we work with over 300 federal agencies and over 85% of the Fortune 500 companies, integrating our platform so that processes can be run much more efficiently. If any of you watch Disney Plus, I have 2 young children, and I think that's all we have between ESPN and Disney Plus. We're either watching the NBA and the WNBA or Disney Plus, and all of those, whether it's NBA, WNBA, Disney Plus, whether it's the Army, they're all using our platform in some way. And so we are educating young people, particularly Latinos, African Americans, veterans, those who need to be reskilled because of plants not functioning in the same way that they had to before. They're evolving now that they did before. And so we're equipping them and empowering them with the skills that they need to be a success today and in the future. We are creating partnerships, whether it's with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, whether it's with the state Hispanic Caucus legislators, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, National Governors Association, with so many different organizations to really understand what's happening on the ground, what these communities need, like broadband and et cetera, and to partner with them on policy alignment and integrating funds, much needed funds that small businesses need. So that's just a drop in the bucket. And I just love what we're doing and love what we're, even more of the work that we're going to do moving forward.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Nicole. So let me turn to you, John, for a minute. What do you think? What do you think might emerge? What might be an unintended consequence, say, if we continue to have this 100% work from home environment? I think you mentioned some of the implications already in your opening comments, but I wonder if you could drill down a little further in terms of what do you think are other things we might need to consider and think about if, in fact, we don't return to the office anytime soon, or in fact there becomes a new standard kind of practice where folks are all 100% remote.
Marco, if you could just look at the impact that offices have had on the enhancement of financial and professional opportunities for minorities, for one. And what does that mean? What do I mean by that? Offices provide the rare shared space where people of all races are not only required to interact with one another, but they are required to interact by law in a civil and respectful manner. And let me double down on that when I talk about interaction. You know, when you think about the time, like who you interact with or your family members, about the times that individuals that you've interacted, how often are they outside of your racial ethnic group? And when you interacted with them, how many of those people did you meet at a place that was not work or school? So just think of the pre-COVID-19 world when you used to go to a restaurant at lunchtime and you saw a table of 8 to 10 people of various races and ages. Was this typically a work-related gathering? How often does this happen if it's not occurring through workplace relationships? Do these diverse gatherings happen as often on the weekends as opposed to during the week. So when you ask about the implications, my first thought is that if you take the office away, in my judgment, we'll have greater separation, greater religious separation, greater racial separation, income separation, and we'll end up becoming more and more separated and stratified, especially when you take into account over the last year and a half. This ideally could increase rather than decrease social unrest and economic disparities in the US. And also, when you look at the death of the traditional office, it brings convenience and comfort for some, but it risks unleveling the playing field for too many Black and Brown Americans who need the workplace to develop relationships and mentorships and break through these office hierarchies that will be ossified if virtual offices are maintained 100% into the future. And a big challenge is if you don't leave, and look, let me stop there. I love the convenience of working from home. Before we go back to 100% in the office, I'm gonna milk every work from home day there is, whether I'm doing dishes on a meeting or using my wonderful, wonderful gift from God air fryer. That's the most pleasing thing in the world. I get it, but the challenge will be if we maintain 100% work from home, it's going to be very difficult for minorities, especially female and Black and Brown individuals, to break through these office hierarchies that will be ossified if virtual offices are maintained indefinitely. Just to finish off, I participated and conducted a research effort with the University of New Hampshire, researching this issue with minority professionals. And what was determined is that the majority of the participants really valued the comfort of the work from home experience, but two important key findings emerged. And that was that offices have historically provided ways for minority professionals to develop relationships, gather information, and create opportunities for advancement that are significantly superior to virtual alternatives. And the majority felt that the death of the traditional office could create further disparities for minority professionals in an already unleveling playing field. Nicole, Karen, and Amber, I'm sure are got to where they are, like myself, through the help of mentors. And I'm sure everyone on this panel engages in mentoring. Mentoring virtually is just not the same as mentoring in person. Sometimes it's just knowing what time of day to go into your boss's office or a senior staffer's office to get some advice. Looking at the way in which a CEO or a director of an agency actually walks into a room, their presence in the room. Or just one last point, it is, in my opinion, not realistic for every time a young Black or Brown professional who's just starting out in their career to chime in on a virtual conference call and say, I disagree with that. I disagree with this idea. I disagree about this opinion. How about we go in this particular route? A virtual setting does not really lend itself to that, and as much as it does in a physical setting. And I think the impact on membership, on mentorship and professional development has to be really taken into consideration. At a minimum, we need to be asking these questions. How will this be impacted in a 100% work from home environment?
Thank you, John. Wow, that's incredible insights there, and thank you for sharing that data. So Karen, I want to go back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier, which is you alluded to last summer, and I think it should go without saying, but I think at the same time, you can never say these things too much, that our society was fundamentally rocked to its core with the witnessing of the murder of George Floyd and the realization of the murder of Breonna Taylor and the further realization that those were not isolated incidents, right? And there was a really fundamental realignment of our understanding of our society. And that had an impact on corporations, on the private sector. There were some real changes that were witnessed. And you alluded to the fact that, you didn't allude, actually, you explained that Workday made some serious commitments that you all really shifted fundamentally. I wonder if you could share a little bit about that. And most importantly, do you have advice for other organizations who may still be struggling, who may not have figured out what the way forward is, how they should be positioning themselves in ways that are frankly better citizens, right? Which was something that was sorely lacking in the past. So I wonder if you could shed a little more light on how that transformation happened at Workday in ways that could be beneficial to other folks.
Yeah, I'll share a couple of things. Thanks for that, Marco. So I'll first start out by saying, look, the biggest thing after last year that we had to recognize is that we needed to have a different impact than what we had been having in the past. And so not only because of what happened with the murder of George Floyd, on top of the pandemic, we had to think about how are we really going to make sure that we were addressing the most common needs and the core needs of our organization, specifically around our Black and Brown communities. And so we were very intentional about that. One of the things that we actually did was we stood up what we call an accelerator team. The accelerator team was over 20 resources that came from all around the company who really took a pause from their normal careers and came over to work in the belonging and diversity space for a full year. So when we did that, I talked about those commitments around hiring and development and belonging earlier. Those folks actually helped us to develop what those commitments were based on what they were hearing from all around the company. So we didn't just take it from the lens of HR or from belonging and diversity. We really got everyone within our organization involved in helping us to solve for this. And as we put some of those things in place, what we found is that the more that we heard from our workforce, the more that we were actually going to be making greater progress, because as we started sharing information, they started saying, this isn't acceptable in our workplace. We need to participate in making sure that there's going to be, as I talked about earlier, that we're going to value inclusion, belonging, and equity for every single one of our workmates. And so that accelerator team was a start of a new evolution, I would say, because we had already done some great work within belonging and diversity, but this just really accelerated our opportunity to think about where we needed to be more intentional. And so, people were significantly impacted by the social justice. We know that. And it caused issues around productivity. It caused issues around innovation. It caused issues around how our employees were engaging. And we knew it was bothering them. So we knew we had to think about how can we actually create the biggest impact. And so that's where we started. That team onboarded in August of last year. We just offboarded that team this past month. And like I said, we saw some really great results, including how we thought about doing things like hiring and development and engagement and promotions and things like, as John was talking about, mentoring and sponsorship. How do we need to look at those things differently so that we can make those impacts? But then also, how do we get into the communities and do things like donate millions of dollars that are going to help people who are actually trying to solve for some of the social justice issues that we're having as well. But your other question around what do people need to do? People need to find ways to act. You need to go within your culture and figure out what works for your company, what works for what you're trying to solve for around your culture, and then focus there. But at the end of the day, you've got to do something. If I were going to encourage companies to do anything, it would be to start somewhere. Don't just sit back and let these things unfold. Figure out how you can play a part in making change and systemic change for the future, for the next generations that are coming up, as well as for those who are in the workplace now. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more for us to do around this, Marco, but we've got to start being much more intentional. We have to start leveraging, like Nicole and John and Amber on this call. What can I learn from them, and what can I share with them that's going to help them along their journeys as well? So we need to stop, tackling this as if we're competitors, and tackle it as if we're teammates. We're teammates trying to come out to where we're teammates trying to all make sure that we win in this game. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Karen. I think that's brilliant. All of the things you said, and that last point about not being competitors. I often think of it in my sector, in the nonprofit sector, but I think in all of the sectors, really, we need to often think much more about the ecosystem, right? And then as ourselves as individual players, right? And I think that's something that's truly beneficial. So Amber, I really love the frame you gave about what makes an effective business and the 3 points. And I want to hone in on the middle one about inclusivity. Because in your comments, you mentioned that Dell is casting a wider net, that it's working to bring in a more diverse talent pool. So can you share a little bit about how Dell is tackling that issue about looking more broadly to try and recruit more folks to your fold?
I love that Karen said we're all in this together, because I think there's also another point in the midst of all of this as you think about what the talent landscape looks like just for all companies across the board. And if you haven't already been impacted by the lack of technical talent, because we are in the midst of a global talent shortage, you probably will be at some point in time. Much like supply and demand and everything else, talent is such a critical piece of ensuring our companies achieve all of their goals. And by 2028, we think there'll be around 4 million technology jobs in the US. And based on graduation rates, we think we're only going to be able to fill maybe 19, 20% of those. So you have to really think about, how do you cast a wider net, and how do you not only zero in on one profile to fill a role, but really build that extended talent pipeline. And so with Dell, we've done a few things here, and similar to what Nicole has talked about earlier, we have a program called Project Immersion. And this is where we partner with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and Hispanic serving institutions, HSIs, to build STEM curriculum to prepare talent for these technical roles. And so they get a lot of technology around engineering, cybersecurity, data science. So really, I think lifting our talent landscape across the board for all of these types of universities and institutions. We also have Changing the Face of Tech. And this is where we cultivate these high touch relationships with HBCUs and HSIs. And we've extended it not only to 4-year universities, but also to 2-year institutions. And we offer career counseling and interview assistance and internships. And again, it's just really making sure your critical talent is ready for that first step in their career journey. A couple of other unique things we're doing is reskilling talent who's rejoining the workforce. We've also redesigned roles to accommodate neurodivergent talent. So I think the real thread in making all these programs successful, though, is the dedication of your teams and hiring managers. And it really shapes your culture. It moves you into the future. And it's really that Dell as an organization has really acknowledged that inclusion drives innovation, it drives career satisfaction, and it drives retention. And so I think we can all agree that that's probably 3 really important aspects to keeping the culture alive.
That's great. Thank you, Amber. Appreciate that. Okay, circling back around to Nicole. You shared some great insights and some great efforts you're doing to build this next generation, right? To partner with institutions. I'm wondering, are there any other efforts, because as you mentioned also, you serve so many entities with your software. What are some of the efforts that ServiceNow is taking to build relationships with communities? How do you all connect as good corporate citizens, shall we say, to help foster progress?
Absolutely. That's such a great question. So in the wake of George Floyd, we, as Karen said, we had to begin to do things differently and to become more connected to the businesses we serve, who are doing the hard work every day of serving people day in and day out. And so we created a racial equity fund of $100 million. And we are dispersing those funds through a variety of banks, including Black-owned banks, community banks, CDFIs, so that those dollars can be invested in communities that need them the most. We know that this pandemic has hit small and medium-sized businesses in ways that we can only imagine. Think about your neighborhood restaurant and the bartenders and the waitresses and the servers, the cooks. And so think about people who were beginning to create businesses and couldn't. And so we are investing dollars in communities to revitalize communities, to help people who want to purchase a home. And so that is one way that we're doing it. And as I mentioned earlier, we are working with a number of organizations to really exercise thought leadership around what does digital transformation mean for all communities? What does universal access to broadband really mean? We're creating coalitions and signing on to letters of support around making sure that legislation includes broadband for everyone, so that everyone can have access to scheduling the vaccine if they need to, or institutions, whether they're HSIs, whether they're HBCUs, and all college institutions, and even elementary schools, right, can have the platform that they need, the learning platform, so that children and students, returning students, can access the learning portals that they need to. And so that's some of the work that we're doing. We're learning what our servicemen and women need on the ground. And we're finding out that, if there is mold or some sort of problem with their on-post housing, or even the privatized housing, that gone are the days where you have to go find your base commander and use some sort of clipboard to fill out your problem. You should be able to use your mobile phone. You should be able to log in your case so that it gets resolved quickly. And that should be kind of a template for solving other problems in a quick, efficient way. The old legacy systems, those days are over with. Enterprises like governments and companies need systems that are much more efficient, interoperable, and those are ways, by talking to people, by creating these partnerships, by listening and learning, creating these resource groups, as Karen mentioned and Amber mentioned, internal resource groups, so we can really find out what the needs are, and developing applications in such a quick and efficient way, and again, secure, so that we can solve problems. People want their problems solved, and that's what we are hard at work doing at ServiceNow.
That's great. Thank you. John, I want to ask you, you mentioned some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges of working from home. But as Nicole was just mentioning, we're also seeing, as a result of this, the change in the office because of the pandemic, some technological transformation. So I'm wondering, are there any emerging technologies or any new kind of innovations that are going to impact the office that actually might be helpful, or do you see more concerns as a result of it?
Sure. I always begin with this when talking about the challenges with, as opposed to working from the home and getting to the office. It's not the office, it's the commute. And during COVID, people have really understood that they want a greater work-life balance. And that's why some larger employees are already experimenting with satellite offices in the suburbs of cities where they already have a downtown headquarters. So the main office will remain important for most companies, but perhaps fewer employees will be expected to be at headquarters on Friday at 9 a.m. And perhaps more people will elect to work in area or live in areas where they can bike to work and walk to work. And so how companies approach business now compared to a year and a half ago has changed drastically. You mentioned technology. It's very interesting. The real estate industry was the most recent industry. It's the last industry because it's rather large and big and didn't have to. It's the last industry to really be disrupted by technology. But COVID has changed the job market forever, has changed the market forever. And that means, frankly, greater worker choice. And so some of the technologies will allow us to work, learn, and socialize much better. But it's also going to be the innovation as it comes to design. So we have a number of our apartment building REITs who they're designing communal space that includes desktop workstations, wired to work virtually, but also to learn virtually. You can go into the newer apartment buildings and you see the common areas that look like the co-working areas from the WeWork buildings and so forth. Office buildings are actually incorporating flex space within their particular environments. In addition to that, it speaks to the challenge of looking at what we can do to utilize innovation and technology within the real estate space to make our buildings, if it ever comes to that, pandemic compliant, so to speak, with the understanding that there are people during a pandemic who obviously can't go into an office building, but what can we do in buildings to ensure that we're utilizing as much touchless technology as possible, whether it comes to utilizing bathrooms or opening doors or the check-in process. What are we doing to utilize innovation to ensure that we have the best air filtration system within our buildings? And in addition to that, as the challenge of climate change only gets more challenging, what are we doing to utilize technology to control temperature to ensure that we're not wasting energy in our building? So it's a really exciting time when you look at the technology and innovation that is really being unleashed during this unfortunate pandemic emergency. And I think the biggest challenge will be going forward. What are we doing in a public sense in terms of supporting good policies to achieve these goals in the public and in private sector?
That's great. Thank you, John. Karen, getting as we get close towards the end of the session here, one relatively quick question for you. So again, you're an exemplar, I think, in terms of these efforts of doubling down on DEIB, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Some of your customers are some of the largest companies in the world. Do you see them following that lead or setting their own path? There's been talk that sometimes some of the companies out there pause some of their DEIB activities as a result of the pandemic. They use that as a reason to not double down, but in fact to pull back a little. So what have you seen in terms of the trends among your network of customers and clients?
Yeah, actually, we've actually seen quite the opposite. We haven't seen people slow down their efforts around DEI. We've actually started to see them pick up. One of, I think, the most critical parts to that is the fact that through Workday, we're able to provide our customers with a lot more data that enables them to be able to see where they need to make change in the DEI space. And so as much as I would love to say, well, actually, I wouldn't love to say that people have actually slowed down their efforts. I'm happy to say that they've actually picked up their efforts. And I think part of that does have to do with data, Marco. And I think, John was just talking about the importance of technology. Technology and data are going to be paramount. They are paramount right now in terms of, how you're needing to assess what's happening within your organization. But one of the things that we recognize is you've got to look at data differently. You can't continue to look at data at the aggregate, thinking that you're solving for broad problems across your workforce or across your customer base. You have to break down that data so that you can start to unpeel the onion and look further to see what's happening beyond the surface. One of the things that we have that we've created is something called a DEIB index. And in doing that, one of the things that we've actually done is starting to look at data at points of intersectionality. And so instead of just saying, hey, how are all of our women doing? We're now looking at how are our Asian women who are millennials doing compared to white men, maybe in their who are maybe baby boomers. But we're looking to see whether or not there's parity across the experiences that those folks are having. And so when it comes to promotions and hiring and attrition and belonging, we're really doubling down to look at that to say, where specifically do we have pockets of opportunity at those points of intersectionality, not just at the aggregate level. And we really believe that you've got to start getting down to that deeper level to really further understand where you have some of these challenges. And so, certainly data and technology play a critical part in this. And we've got to continue to leverage our data, like the others have said, our technology in ways that are going to continue to help us solve some of these issues. So again, some great work going on, but we've really got to take data and technology and put it to work so that we can continue doing even more than what we've done already.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Amber, last question for you as we get close to time, but I want to give you a chance, one final question for you to weigh in. Speaking of technologies, right? Dell Technologies is the corporation's name. It's also been described, I've heard, as a place that people really enjoy working at, right? And so I'm wondering, in terms of your efforts to build diversity and inclusion, what are some of the things you've done to create this sense of community among your employees, and how have you managed to, if you have managed to maintain that, even as people have been forced into a remote model? Oh, you're muted, Amber, I think, by the way. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Never a session
okay
passes without. Yes, we can hear you good.
Problem. Yeah, no, I didn't think.
Always happens.
Yeah, so it's a great question because you're right. Even though we no longer are tied to a physical location, it also creates barriers for how we interact with one another. And one of the things at Dell that we've seen a significant increase in is our employee resource groups, or our ERGs. And we have 13 ERGs with 450 chapters across 70 countries. And our participation rate is around 54,000 team members globally. So it's a really cool way where you can socialize, you can make meaningful connections and really create that network. And it's proven to be a source of community belonging. And what we found too is participants who are part of an ERG, 31% of them say their relationships have strengthened and 56% say their productivity has gone up. And they're a lot of fun. I mean, I'm actually one of the executive sponsors for Latino Connection ERG, which is for promoting cultural awareness and opportunities for our Hispanic and Latinx team members. And so we got a lot of cool stuff. We have salsa dancing, cooking classes, language immersion. We have a music happy hour every Friday afternoon. So I think for me, and I hope for the other 54,000 ERG participants, they get the same experience.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, this has been a super rich conversation. I think I'm already over time, but it's been that critical, that insightful, that enlightening. So I thought it worth continuing to comment. So now, as we close, in one sentence, let me ask you all, either answer this question, if you will. And we're going to go in reverse order. I'm going to start with Amber this time. Answer either what is the more expected answer of what is the most important thing we need employers to be thinking about as they think about the office of the future, or what do we think is going to be the biggest surprise of the new world we continue to move into in terms of the office of the future? So be thinking about your answers. You got one sentence. Let's start with you, Amber.
Biggest surprise is that it will continue to be the unknown.
There you go. There you go. The one thing that's certain is that there's uncertainty, right?
Uncertainty.
All right, Karen.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we have to do is we have to continue keeping the pedal pushed to the metal on this topic. We cannot slow down. We've got to continue making progress forward.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. John.
Our CEO, Steve Weschler of NAREIT, launched a revamped Dividends Through Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion initiative to deal with the issue of the lack of racial diversity within the real estate space and to offer more perspective. If a person who is living with numerous relatives in a small place, working from home for their kitchen, they're going to wonder about being judged by their surroundings. And I think we have to continue to look at the different perspectives that have emerged from the work from home debate.
Awesome. Awesome. And bring us home, Nicole.
One thing for certain is that we have to make the world of work better for people, and that includes all people. And ServiceNow is doing just that.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, let me thank each and every one of you. Nicole Francis Reynolds of ServiceNow, John Jones of NAREIT, Karen Taylor from Workday, and Amber Cantu from Dell Technologies. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate all of your insights. We're really grateful for both your insights in this session and your partnership with CHCI. So we'll look forward to continuing this conversation and seeing you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, as we conclude, I just want to remind you all of just a couple of things. First of all, please keep engaging with us on social media. We're seeing great commentary. We're seeing great highlights throughout on social media. So remember to use the hashtag CHCIHHM21. Please continue to help expand this conversation beyond just the folks tuning in. Don't forget, we have a full slate of sessions scheduled tomorrow. I want to encourage you to come back and attend those sessions and weigh in as well. If you know anybody who would be interested in joining the conference and hasn't signed up yet, please remind them that they can still join us by simply going to chci.org and registering. It's still free to attend, but they have to register to access the platform. And of course, don't forget to join us for our 44th annual awards gala Thursday night, September 23rd, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's gonna be memorable. All right, thank you so much for participating on this panel, and we'll let you all get back to whatever's happening in your office of the future.